Welcome to the replay from our virtual Green Drinks August 2022 Sustainable Housing Models. We welcomed Mike Labbé from Home Opportunities, Chris Stevens from Co-Housing Options Canada, Linda Kruss and Rosalind J. Hill from Ottawa Co-Housing, and Larissa Stendi from Roots to Roofs. So sustainable housing, we know it's a badly needed thing right now as we face one of the worst crises of our generation. I know we just got out of a crisis and now we've got the climate crisis and now we've got the housing crisis too. So I know we're just lots of different crises, but we do know that this is definitely one. According to the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, we will need an additional 5.8 million homes by 2030, which is 3.5 million homes beyond our current trajectory. And we're not including labor shortages and a softening housing market in that. So we need to start thinking about new housing models, not only in how we build our homes, but in how we buy, sell, and ultimately live in them. So during our event tonight, we will hear from several individuals and organizations that are striving to create more sustainable and ultimately more healthy housing models. So I want to welcome up our first speaker, and it's Mike Labbé, and he's been involved in the production of affordable housing for 42 years. In 1992, Mike founded Options for Homes, nonprofit corporation, where he was instrumental in developing a model that provided mixed income housing to thousands of households without any permanent government subsidy. So well done. Options for Homes has become a leading organization in the social enterprise movement. In 2018, Mike went on to launch his current endeavor, which is Home Opportunities, where he's working to develop poverty-reducing hubs throughout Ontario. They are currently working on 5,000 units worth of potential developments that will provide ownership opportunities to households with incomes between 30,000 and 50,000. So great initiative, Mike. Come on in and talk to us a little bit about what you're up to, and set us the scene for our sustainable housing tonight. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Nick. Thanks for the introduction. So the first thing I'm doing is going to throw a wrinkle into the statement. Sustainable housing is not kind of what you were talking about in terms of your introduction. It's how do we provide a sufficient supply of housing. And so to some degree, I want to speak to that and the model that we're currently working with to try to address that particular need. Not that sustainable housing isn't important, because virtually nothing can be built new today that doesn't require a significant amount of sustainability because of the changes to the code and the future changes to the code, and the fact that energy costs are such that it's an inducement to produce sustainability. So you kind of get the sustainability for free. The work that we're doing actually generally exceeds the sustainability criteria by 20 to 25% anyway. So the greater issue is supply. We're so deficient in terms of housing that we cannot find an easy way out. The easiest way to explain it for people to understand, perhaps, is that there's been an enormous focus on rental housing as a way to address the supply issues. The government has set aside all the dollars that were just described about in the questions that we just went through. But as I mentioned, for those who didn't quite make it at the time, in order to address Canada's housing needs and the supply needs through rental, you would need to come up with $1.2 trillion. And so it's important, one, to outline what the issues are that we're trying to address and how we might approach them. So let me just say from the beginning that Canadian taxpayers are welcome to invest as much money as they want into rental. That is not the issue here. The issue here is we need, whatever it is, 1.5 million units in Ontario, 5 million units across the country. We're currently producing 200,000 units a year. We need to go to 400,000 units a year. How do we get there? What are we dealing with to deal? One of the most significant issues that we're dealing with is that it's to the advantage of the development industry to maintain the supply problem, because it's only because of the supply problem that they can manage to get 25 and 30% increases in sale prices year after year until the thing collapses for a while and we're back to square one when we start to move forward in terms of housing. So we have that issue. We have the issue that housing has become a commodity. And people are talking about that and saying, how do we get rid of it? We don't. Once housing is a commodity, politically, it's impossible to eliminate it as a commodity, but we need to know about it. A lot of the programs we're working with are time limited so that the housing provided disappears, so the problem doesn't get solved permanently. We operate at very small scale. It's going to take a very long time to do 150 units a year to get to hundreds of thousands a year. So we need to be able to work at scale. And the carrying costs are constantly being moved up in terms of what is affordable. So that now in Toronto, an affordable unit is $1,400 a month for one bedrooms, $1,500 for twos, $1,600 for threes. So it gets very difficult for people of very modest incomes to get into that, even the affordable housing space. So we shouldn't underestimate the lack of government resources. You know, every time you talk, somebody's asking for billions of dollars for healthcare, for Indigenous communities, for defense, which is something we haven't had to spend billions on for a while. So within the context of that, what do we need in the way of a large-scale housing solution? Critical factor is that it has to work without government grants and subsidies. Once you make that determination, then you head off in a very interesting direction. The only type of housing that works without government grants and subsidies is ownership. Ownership is something that's very desirable. We talked about the percentage of owners across Canada. The percentage of owners in major cities is often below 50%, so that there's variations as you go from place to place. So once we understand that ownership is the potential direction, then things start to resolve themselves. Then some of the problems become assets. The most significant problem that becomes an asset when you talk about ownership is the commodification of housing. If you basically understand that housing is now a commodity, then people producing housing can offer an investment opportunity in housing. If you offer the investment opportunity with a return upon resale, you've fallen upon the one idea that allows somebody to move into a home, take responsibility for 50% of the value of the home, and have the other 50% go to investors who get paid back when people sell. And you've all of a sudden created an opportunity to produce as many units as you want, as many units as people are willing to invest in order to reach people with incomes between $35,000 and $75,000 a year. So what I want to try to introduce to the discussion, and it can go whichever way it wants, but I want to introduce to the discussion that ownership needs to become a bigger piece of the solution to the housing supply problem. Because once you can move to scale and produce the jobs that are associated with scale, and the ability to start using various technologies that come with scale, you then start to reduce the overall cost plus the carrying costs, plus you can start producing the 1,000-unit projects a year that you need. 1,000 units a year, you need 200 projects a year across the country. 100 units a year, you need 2,000 projects across the country. Very different scale of trying to operate and pull things together. It takes as much work to develop a 1,000-unit project as it takes to develop a 200-unit project. So the work that goes into the coordination of it is similar. So it gives you that kind of advantage. But most importantly is that if you're working with a system that doesn't require grants and subsidies, you've reduced your problem to one thing: availability of land. So if you have land available where the person is willing to receive payment when construction starts at full market value, you have an asset that allows you to make everything else work in terms of the model that we're working with. So the message I wanted to get out, because there's a number of people here, is that if you have an interest in the housing issue because you want to participate and get involved, and start to be part of the solution, what you need to bring to the table through your contacts are land opportunities, be they government land, be they nonprofit land, be they church and charitable land. You know, any site is going to receive full market value. You just need the patience of the person who owns it. I've recently tied up a farm near an urban center because the farmer wanted to do social purpose as well as get a fair return. So the opportunities start to multiply if you take on a solution that doesn't require you to first raise money. And so the two things should go on, raising the money and doing the grants and subsidies, but there should be more effort put into ownership as a solution because of all the different secondary benefits that come from it. So if I'm right, I didn't pay attention to when my timing started. I was aiming to do 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes, because really it's your feedback and your interest and your input that leads somewhere, and your willingness to follow up with me and say, I've heard about this land site, I've heard about that land site. What is useful to know is that if we're successful at moving this model forward, there's a job for anybody who wants to work in the housing field. The jobs created through this opportunity across Canada over 10 years would produce 200 to 5,000 jobs, depending on how many people want to get involved and how it moves forward. And that's just the jobs in coordinating and developing projects, moving them forward. The construction jobs, of course, are 1.5 jobs per unit for each unit. So if you add the 200,000 units a year that you need to satisfy the supply demand, then you're producing 300,000 jobs. I've done a lot of work internationally. The single greatest economic development opportunity that exists in any country that is stable around the world is their crying need for housing. So we could produce 300,000 jobs a year just by producing the housing that Canadians need. And there isn't another industry that can do that so readily. So for what it's worth, those are my ideas that I wanted to put on the table for you to consider. And I'm going to hang around for questions whenever they occur, which I believe is at the end of the presentation, right, Nick?
Yeah, I didn't see anything pop up yet, so maybe we'll kind of roll over to Chris and see if any questions come up. We can kind of wrap you in, and potentially we'll maybe get you involved on some of the Q&A sessions at the end there as well.
Right. I will watch the chat and answer them as they come up.
And Linda's just wondering quickly, where do you get the investors from?
Am I answering it verbally or in the chat?
Sure. Go ahead. Go ahead, Virgil. Yeah.
So the investors are from multiple sources. We only work with nonprofit delivery agencies, which reminds me of one last thing I wanted to say. The important thing of the ownership solution is that you have to bring all best practices to the table. Bringing best practices to the table means the involvement of the charitable sector, the nonprofit sector, and the profit-making sector, properly regulated and controlled by the nonprofit sector. So where do we get our investments from? We get them from government, because as a nonprofit delivery agency, we have access to special considerations under the co-investment fund, under the infrastructure funds with the province, and we get access to deferrals on development charges. So 3 sources of government funding. On top of that, we access borrowing from credit unions and banks for a portion of the lending. So it's a layered financing approach that gets both private sector funding and government funding involved. The model can work with only one level of government. It can work with no levels of government because of the fact that it layers the financing, and some of the financing isn't paid back until people sell. Hopefully that's a complete enough answer.
Yeah, no, great model. Encourage folks to check out that link. I shared the home opportunities link into chat there. So encourage folks to just check that out if they want to surf around a little bit. Pop a question into chat there. They can pop it out to the community, or you can pop it directly to Mike. So thanks so much, Mike. It's great to see the work you're doing. And I know you've come on recently as a SmartNet Alliance member, and it really helped us in our organization as well. So really appreciate your efforts. And yeah, stick around. We may have some more questions as folks sort of surf through the website there. All right, so next up we've got Christopher Stevens, and he's a community builder focused on advancing a more sustainable future for his son, family, friends, and the people of Canada. He is an experienced leader and advisor in the field of sustainability. He specializes in developing and implementing strategies that bring together commercial, public, Indigenous, and community partners to create individual, social, economic, and ecological value. Highlights include helping to found Roots to Roofs Community Development, which we're going to hear about a bit more later, acting as a sustainability innovation advisor to the Canadian Union of Skilled Workers, serving 7 years as the executive director over at the Ontario Sustainable Energy Association, initiating Ontario's successful Green Energy and Economy Act campaign, and most recently serving as executive director for Co-Housing Options Canada. So welcome in, Chris. Really great to see you, and talk to us a little bit about the work that you're doing around there.
Great, thanks so much. And nice to see a lot of familiar faces from personal life as well as from the past when I worked more closely with SNA. So thanks for having me, and excited that 3 of the organizations that we're working with are all new members of SNA as well. So I took a step back similar to Mike, and I'm going to talk about some of the things that Mike discussed in more detail, as well as around the co-housing file and how they all sort of fit into this sustainable building discussion. And I titled the presentation for tonight, Let's Build a More Beautiful, Resilient, and Sustainable World Together, because this is really about a collaborative effort to build the space and the life and the world and the communities that we really would like to be living in, rather than complaining about the dark places that we see ahead of us right now with all the challenges that we're facing. Now, throughout the presentation, there'll be different images from co-housing communities or other projects that I've been involved in or that I've had a chance to visit. And I think I'm up to about 45, 50 co-housing communities in North America and Europe. So you'll see at the bottom where they are, and if you get a chance, I highly recommend that you check them out. There's some really beautiful ones. Now, this is the first co-housing community in Canada. This is in Langley, BC. It's called Windsong, and you can see that it's got this beautiful glass-covered atrium that covers over the stacked townhouses that the 2 sort of wings of the community go out from. And in the center, there's a common house. Now, my agenda is pretty straightforward. I'm going to talk about the collaborating non-for-profits that we're working with at Co-Housing Options Canada. Home Opportunities, which is Mike's organization, is one, and I'll talk about the others in a second as well. Talk a little bit about sustainability for just a moment to make sure that we're all on the same page about what I'm talking about, because people throw the term around and it means very different things to different people. Then talk about a few of the problem situations that we're looking to address and the aligned goals of the different organizations that are working together, and the overarching sort of strategy that we're using to move the housing file forward on. And this idea of community wealth, that the surplus that's generated from the development process and from other social enterprises that are involved with us is actually used to create more community benefit and more wealth for us rather than going into private pockets. Talk about co-housing for a little bit, and then I will give you all a call to action, and Mike's already said it, so hopefully by the time we're done today, all of you will be looking for sites for us or reaching out to us to talk about some great opportunities or connections that you can make so that we can go and make co-housing, workforce housing, and Indigenous housing happen in Ontario and possibly in other parts of Canada. So there's really 4 organizations that are in an MOU collaboration. We've been working together for various different periods. Roots to Roofs is just about a year old. Co-Housing Options Canada, which is about, I think, 3 or 4 years old now. Home Opportunities about 4 or 5, but you've heard about Mike's sort of history. And then Community Wealth, which exists here in Ontario and is based on a number of years experience that from Mike's end, which is a multi-stakeholder co-op made up of service providers, co-ops, credit unions, as well as the communities or the development entities that are developing the housing projects and other social enterprises. These 4 organizations are working to collaborate, and we're actually in the process of setting up Community Wealth in British Columbia, Alberta, Yukon, and possibly in Manitoba, Saskatchewan in the near future. We offer 3 sort of big buckets of services. One is around the community development services, helping sort of bring the community together, identify what sort of projects and housing that they're looking at. the development consultant services, which are really focused on coordinating all the different pieces of the development project, as well as the financing, and then the actual not-for-profit financing framework and coordination, which is Community Wealth's responsibility. Now, I'm not going to get into the real depth of how the model works, but more speak to the point that this is about not-for-profits working using a not-for-profit framework to create community benefit and to make it easier for people to own their own homes, and for other social enterprises to create jobs and to create training opportunities. Now, when we're talking about sustainability, I remember being asked by somebody within the energy sector about, well, what does environmental sustainability mean? And I said, well, it's not really about environmental sustainability. It's about these three pieces: the social, societal piece, the economic piece, and the environmental. And finding the sustainable path forward for us, as well as a more resilient way and hopefully more beautiful and happy way of living, is really, I think, important to us. When we think about high performance buildings, the reality is, as Mike said a moment ago, is that anything that we're looking at building is going to be high performance buildings. Now, whether it has the rubber stamp of Passive House or other things, that's maybe not so important as actually trying to get to as high a standard as possible to create as much benefit in the immediate and longer term for those that are going to live there. But it's the social cultural piece that's really powerful. Our most powerful technology really is our culture and how we see the world, how we interact with each other. And that's where my interest has been, and where Mike and I's sort of pieces have come together, and where also Roots to Roofs is now clicking in from an Indigenous perspective. So we really are looking at how do we make this sustainable financially, socially, environmentally, and how do we create as much benefit immediately and in the longer term as we move forward. Now, there's a lot of different problem situations. We've got all kinds of ecosystem collapse issues going on. We talk about climate change or climate disruption being one of the biggies, but it's not just about climate change. There's a whole lot of stuff going on around us, and we really need to be thinking about how do we solve those problems. And it is a big elephant for us to try to capture and eat, or whatever we want to call it, deal with. But I consciously believe right now that this really starts with us as individuals working together at the community level to create opportunities. I was heavily involved in policy and regulatory change, super important, but the reality is that the people that come after us don't know why we did it and don't care. The next people that come in will rip it all out, destroy it all, and then we'll be left with exactly where we were or a worse situation. So my passion around co-housing has really come from this idea of, well, if we can create clusters of families and neighbors working together to create a more sustainable life for themselves and their larger community, that'll then reflect out into a larger perspective. But we've seen ourselves increasingly disconnected from our families and communities. COVID, I think, really highlighted this, but also created some opportunities for us to become more local and connect more into the networks around us. But there is a definite undermining and fracturing of civil society, surveillance capitalism, all kinds of issues, rising authoritarianism, all kinds of stuff really pulling us apart. So how can we get us pulled together and at the same time deal with this national housing crisis that's facing us? These are really big challenges, and there's a lot more facing us. So how do we work together to make some great stuff happen? So the four organizations that are involved right now really have a number of aligned goals. We want to reduce poverty, we want to improve society, and we want to protect our planet. We want to make homeownership financially accessible to everybody. We want to normalize co-housing as one of the best ways to live, increase the likelihood of success of these developments moving forward. And I think it's important to highlight that in Mike's 40 years, he hasn't had a project not go forward. He's had tremendous success in using a not-for-profit framework, first in co-ops, then in not-for-profit development, and then this community wealth framework and approach that we're using. Accelerate the community formation and development process for co-housing and for Indigenous housing, increase certainty while mitigating risk, and then use the surplus that's generated through the development process to create more benefit for our communities. So our strategy is, let's set a positive precedent. When we're talking to municipalities, we're talking to other stakeholders, First Nations communities, CMHC, we want to show them solutions. We want to give them a path forward that actually helps address their challenges. And in doing so, then serves our collective interests, whether that's co-housing, Indigenous housing, workforce housing, or whatever. So we want to build financially accessible, high functioning communities using high performance workforce housing, Indigenous housing, and co-housing. leverage community wealth for the benefit of the participants at the front end and then the broader community afterwards, and create a more beautiful, resilient, and sustainable world for ourselves and future generations. Now, Mike's framework, the community wealth not-for-profit development framework, really means that from a homeowner's perspective, you can own a house with an income of $35,000 to $75,000 with only 5% down. Now, at the same time, if you don't have the 5% down, but you fit into that category, there is a rent-to-own framework that's possible for up to 10% of the units within the development project. Ownership means, it comes with pride. It comes with an opportunity to actually have an asset, grow that asset, but also look after it for yourself, for your family. And compared to a rental scenario, it's much more flexible. You can have someone rent a room from you and not be penalized for doing so, which means that money then can be used to help cover the cost, for instance, of your monthly mortgage. So the ownership approach really creates a whole lot of opportunity for us to do some really great stuff. And at the end of the day, you're looking at a monthly carrying cost that will be similar or less than what most people are paying for rent in most urban centers. From a landowner's perspective, what we're proposing is we pay fair market value for the land. The key is that they need to be willing to wait until construction starts. So we line up all the financing, do the due diligence, and they get paid for their property at that time. There's an opportunity for them to contribute to our sustainability impact, these goals that I was talking about earlier. And their families and neighbors can all participate. So it could be, for instance, in Victoria, we're talking to a family right now that owns three properties beside each other. So we're talking to them about they continuing to live on the property in the new development, but then talking to their neighbors and giving them a chance to have family members move in and be participants in the project, or also those that want to downsize and maybe sell their home and move into a smaller apartment, be there too. So the project, because it's not just about co-housing, but also about workforce housing or Indigenous housing, can actually have a larger benefit to a larger group of people, while at the same time pulling in the various agendas that our organizations are all trying to advance. And from a community perspective, and when I say community, I mean municipality or First Nation, very little impact on taxpayers, 1.5 jobs per unit built within the trades, an incentive to attract industries. So in many instances right now, Mike is actually having conversations with employers who can't find workers because they can't find people who can live in the community. They have to commute too far and there's no housing for them to move. Increased percentage of owners means an increased tax base, greater employment stability, and then at the same time, for every unit that we build, there's enough money to then create another 1 to 3 units afterwards as that money is paid back. So we're actually magnifying and creating more supply rather than trying to build just enough and then sustain that into perpetuity with a very limited resource base. So what about co-housing? This is great. This is the larger sort of housing framework that we're coming at it together in. Well, co-housing, for those of you that don't know what it is a approach to having the community involved in shaping the neighborhood and the homes that they're going to live in. Now, there's a tendency when we start talking about co-housing that everybody wants to talk about the buildings, but in reality, the people are the picture. The people are at the core of what we are trying to create when it comes to co-housing. And they're actively involved from the very early start of the process. In most instances, the community forms, then they go look for land. In our instance, we're looking for land or we're looking for community. We're trying to move both pieces together because without land, there is no project. But the people are at the core, and there's so much pent-up demand for co-housing right now that there are people that will come and participate in projects when they are there and arise and help shape what that culture and what the design principles are going to look like. So the people are at the center and the buildings are the frame. This is not my quote. This is Chuck Durrett, one of my mentors, uses the line all of the time, but it's something that's really worthwhile thinking about. It's not so much about the building, it really is about the people. And then how are you going to use the design to magnify the impact of the people living there. So co-housing is a planned residential neighborhood that combines private homes with shared indoor and outdoor spaces that are designed to support an active, interdependent community life. So pedestrian-centric, sustainability-focused, and really focused on the people and creating chance opportunities for people to interact It's like walking from your house, from the subway or from your car, and it takes you half an hour to get home, even though it's 20 meters, because you stop and chat with folks along the way if you've got the time. Now, there's a lot of trends pushing us towards co-housing and other forms of intentional livings. So things like smaller families, extended families living farther apart, people living longer, a desire for more traditional neighborhoods where you know your neighbors, and a desire to live a more sustainable lifestyle that is less car dependent. And in co-housing, it's about balancing privacy and community. So you have your own fully functional apartment or house, as well as extensive commons that are used by the community. So I'll talk about what those look like in a second. But I'll share this slide deck afterwards so you can look at it. But co-housing is about a longer term solution. Apartments, sort of go towards that direction, a condominium or a co-op housing project. But co-housing has a lot more intentionality around the design and maximizing the interaction in the shared spaces. Communes also sort of fit into that category, but again, a bit different. But then you've got a whole list of short-term solutions or spaces where you have a significantly less amount of private space and a lot more commons. And in Ontario, there's been a lot of using of the term co-housing with a hyphen in it to really refer to co-living. People buying a house together, each having their own independent rooms and then sharing some of the amenities within that house versus actually having their own fully functional unit and then having commons that they share with others. Now in co-housing, it's more affordable in the long term. I'll use Cohabitat Quebec in Quebec City as an example. The residents in the 41 units there pay about $6 a month for their internet. They have high-speed internet, fiber running to their common house that's then divided up amongst the rest of the community. You've got proximity, you're close to people, you can co-care for one another, you have your independence while being interdependent, a lot of opportunity for social interconnectivity. It's a safe space because you've created not an enclave with a wall around it, but a village where people can interact and outsiders can come in and out, but at the same time, everyone can see each other. The windows face the inner courtyard if it's something that's more single story or 3 or 4 story. If it's a tower, of course, a little bit different, and then more sustainable as well. In co-housing, people share things like ideas, the ups and downs of life, utilities, community meals, common house, guests and caregiver suites, cleaning and maintenance, tools and equipment, all kinds of things, maybe even sailboats. And it can look like a lot of different things. It can be like this sort of central courtyard crescent at the bottom, an urban tower, dispersed units, but typically you're looking at about 15 to 35 units in a co-housing complex. I've been to communities where they're as large as 41. I've been to communities where they're as small as 9 units, but 15 to 35 seems to be about the sweet spot. Now, in the slides, you'll see that there's a bunch of examples, and on the bottom right-hand corner, I showed what an acre looks like, and then the footprint of a number of communities. So you've got Vancouver co-housing up in the top left, less than an acre, probably about 3/4 of an acre. Very small footprint, but 31 units, a lot of common space. Windsong, which you saw at the very first slide, there with 34 units in Langley, Pioneer Valley down in Massachusetts, Monksogard, which is actually 5 co-housing communities around a farm. You've got a seniors co-housing community, and then 3 other intergenerational. One is ownership, one is rental, one is a co-op, and then the last one is actually an intergenerational youth community. So you have to be under, I think, 35 to live there. And the idea is it's a great place for people to go and start adulting and learn how to look after their own things. Quimper Village, which is a seniors co-housing community, Wild Sage and Silver Sage, which are right across from each other down in Boulder, Colorado. So just to give you an idea of the footprint of what communities can look like, where the principles are always the same, but the sort of manifestation of the community and their culture designs what they are going to look like. Now, co-housing doesn't mean that it is only one neighborhood. It actually can be a cluster, and I'm going to show you a few examples right now. So this is the Holiday neighborhood down in Boulder, Colorado, and I just got off a 2-hour training session with Brian Bowen, who is part of CADIS down there. He was involved in developing this project, and it started with Wild Sage co-housing, which is the blue circle there. It is a 34-unit intergenerational co-housing community. Just below it is Silver Sage. It was the last part of the development. It's a seniors co-housing community, 16 units. And then it's surrounded by a affordable housing development. So the co-housing project actually became the cornerstone of this much larger affordable housing development. It was a brownfield that was cleaned up and then created this amazing space. They've got some mixed use buildings. Those brown buildings where the 7 is are actually offices, a nice little park. And the whole community uses the Common House at different times of the year for meetings with politicians when there's a campaign or when there's an event, that sort of thing. But the co-housing community is its own high-functioning neighborhood that then has helped shape the larger community as well. And same thing with seniors. A lot of the folks have moved into the Silver Sage community as they age in place. This is the Monksegard project, just a little bit closer up that I mentioned a second ago. Again, various different co-housing communities beside each other. And then this is a project that didn't go ahead, but that Mike and I worked on together up in Northern Ontario, where it was an old golf course. And we were looking at using the old clubhouse and turning it into the Common House, having the co-housing project developed in the upper right-hand corner there with about 30 units and another 9 acres of protected green space because there's a floodplain just to the north. And then we were looking at it anywhere up to around 100 units of workforce housing. And the idea was by leveraging this larger property, we create a way of spreading out the risk, but also helping address the housing need that exists in this community. And the same holds true in any other community. But you can see this idea of working together and creating benefit for everybody. So my call to action to you, Mike's call to action to you, all of our call to action is, please help us find some sites. And if you're interested in being part of a co-housing community, then let us know. You're going to hear from Linda in a second as well about some of the things that are happening in Ottawa. We're looking for collaborative landowners that aren't in a rush to sell right away, but are willing to sign an option agreement and work with us in the next probably 8 to 12, maybe 16 months as we secure the financing and complete the due diligence. We pay market value for the land. So that's a key piece. It's not looking for somebody to make it less. We're looking for larger sites, ideally, to do a sort of multiplex approach like the one I just showed you. It can be smaller. For instance, in Toronto right now, we're looking at a 1.7 acre site right in the West End that we're hoping to secure. But in other communities just to the west of Toronto, we've found some much larger properties, and out in BC with Roots to Roofs, we're looking at a possible 17 acre site out on Vancouver Island. So some really cool, exciting things happening. But you can see the sort of numbers per acre roughly that we're looking at. And then we're looking for communities where there is a clear housing and economic development need, which is pretty much everywhere in Canada right now. But it's a key piece because we're going to approach the municipality or the First Nation and offer them a solution that isn't going to require them to draw into their tax base or create subsidies for the long term. And as a bonus, I'll just flag this because we've been having some discussions with some of the groups that we're working with. If it's a more rural project where there is land that ideally is going to be protected, we can do a smaller co-housing, workforce housing project as part of it, and then sever the rest of the land into a land trust. So right now we're looking at a 100-acre site, and we're talking about 10 acres becoming housing, and then the other 90 acres being put into a land trust so that it's protected for perpetuity. Now, that discussion was out in BC, but the same could hold true here in Ontario, for instance, in the Greenbelt, where people are quite concerned about what's happening with development into the Greenbelt. So some exciting things to think about, and we'd be happy to chat and would be also happy to get you involved. And if you're on the builder side, or if you're interested in the financing piece, we're also happy to share, discuss, and see how we might collaborate. Thank you. And as my son, when he was only 3 and he's now 7, used to say, all done. Thanks. And happy to answer some questions afterwards.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, great. Excellent presentation. Really exciting. I love those photos. Great pics from around the world on the co-housing. Many places that I'd love to live there. We did have a couple of questions come through. So Janet was wondering, why did the Sudbury co-housing project not go ahead?
Yeah, I think there was a number of contributing factors there. So one was the landowner. 2, I think there was some disagreement within the group around the intention and direction, and the understanding that we have a clear set of values as the service provider as well, that we needed to meet as we move things forward. So I still have a good relationship with the folks up there in Sudbury, and still hoping that we can make something move forward in the next little while, and actually talking to the economic development officer in the next little while as well. But great group of people, and I would say reach out to Sweet Fern and to also Silver Birch, because there's actually 2 communities up there if you're interested in co-housing or seniors co-housing.
Great. And Sandra's wondering, how does this work on unceded Indigenous territories or on Indigenous reserves? I know Larissa's going to talk a little bit later, but maybe just give us a little preview of how that works on the Indigenous reserves.
Yeah, so I think the first key piece is that the community wants to do something along this line. So that would be the key at the very beginning. The other piece is typically a certificate of possession is used. So it's a long-term lease. It's like in Algonquin Park where somebody has a cottage and it renews, and you can extend it into perpetuity. I was just up on near the Saugeen and stayed at a cottage recently, and they lease it from the Saugeen there, and it's a ongoing lease. There's certain terms that are built into it. The key is providing stability so that the banks see it as a stable, I guess, opportunity for lending the mortgage money and all the other pieces. So as long as it's, I think, 20 to 50 years with renewable into perpetuity, I think is the sort of key piece, but it's called a certificate of possession. So the First Nation needs to say, yes, we want to do this. And 2, they need to be willing to do some sort of a certificate of possession to make it possible for it to act like its owned land, even though it's a lease.
Yeah, and talk to us a little bit about what you have coming up. I know you've done workshops in the past. Is co-housing right for you? Do you plans to have some of those for the fall? Is that something that folks should look out for?
Yeah, we're talking about it right now. Some of it we're looking at standardizing a bit more, so it's part online course, part workshop or mastermind group. So there'll be a couple of events getting announced probably in September. The big thing that's coming up though is that in Madison, Wisconsin, in a couple of weeks, there's the Coho US conference. So I'm heading down there to facilitate a couple of workshops on seniors co-housing and co-housing with some of my colleagues from Sage Seniors Co-housing. And yeah, we've got a couple of projects that we're hoping are going to move forward that are larger housing projects that Mike is leading, but co-housing will be embedded within those projects here in Ontario. So let us know if you're interested in finding out about those as it moves forward. And then Roots to Roofs and Co-housing Options and Home Opportunities are doing some interesting work out in BC, both on the mainland and on the island. And I think we're also going to be doing some work in Manitoba in the next little while. So happy to share.
That's great. Yeah, hopefully people can stay in touch. So I know you've been to a lot of different co-housing spots around the world. Where would be one that you would say, hey, this is where I want to live? Is there one that was just really stood out to you amongst all those different ones?
Yeah, well, what I would say is that every time I visit a co-housing community, I leave going, wow, I really like these people. I really want to live here with these people. And it's been consistent across the board, whether it was in Canada and the States or over in France, Germany, or Denmark. Just really, really great people. There's a real intentionality within the community to create a high functioning space. Not that there isn't conflict, but to really have a great group of people. And for me, it's the kids that I run into that have grown up or are growing up there, and I see them and go, wow, like imagine having 35 households of aunts and uncles that are, all different but interesting, helping raise your kids in a sort of sustainable context in a very thriving social space. It's just amazing. The kids are just really great. So the closest that I would really recommend visiting if they're doing tours again is Cohabitat Quebec in Quebec City. There is also one community in Ottawa, Terra Firma. It's a little bit more organic, but also super lovely people. But Cohabitat Quebec is really, their common house is one of my favorites that I've seen, and the courtyard is just really lovely. I was there in the wintertime when they had a skating rink set up and 35-foot snow pile that my son was climbing, but in the summertime it's a beautiful little playground and space, and they're really fantastic hosts. So and if you get out to BC, where most of the co-housing is in Canada, I strongly recommend that you visit some of the communities out there, Vancouver Co-housing or Windsong or Quayside, or well, there's a bunch of them. But the Canadian Co-housing Network, which myself and I saw Mary Wong is on the call as well. We're both directors there. They have got a whole listing of communities that you can check out. Sage Seniors Co-housing, if you're interested in seniors co-housing specifically, has some great resources. I'm also on their board, just about to step off. If you're interested in co-housing in Ottawa, there are several groups that are moving projects forward. But like I said, our approach right now is actually looking at co-housing and workforce housing, or co-housing and Indigenous housing, and trying to magnify the effect and get some more projects going and make it more financially accessible.
Great. And John's wondering, where are you? Maybe you don't have to give an exact address, but just wondering where you live.
Yeah, well, so I live in Toronto right now. I'm on the west side, but I'm hoping Mike and I and a few other colleagues and folks that are part of Co-housing Toronto, we met with a landowner a couple of weeks ago, and we're just waiting for some site plans and to initiate the discussion around possibly purchasing the land. So if that moves forward, we could have a really exciting announcement later this year. So fingers are crossed. I'm not going to say any more than that because I don't want to jinx it, but my goal was first to live in co-housing, and then as I was doing the work, because of my experience running not-for-profits, I figured, well, I should really share this with others and build a team of experienced people, and that's where Mike's experience as a developer and development consultant pulls in, and where my network of other folks with other expertise around sociocracy and co-housing and everything else, design and architecture, all pull in, because I don't need to be the expert on everything. I just need to know how to pull us all together to make amazing things happen.
No, that's great. We'll keep our fingers crossed. So last question for you, Chris. If somebody who's sort of fairly new to co-housing, where would you say that their best start? Is there like a book, or, I know you've got some resources on the website there. What would you direct people to do? To go visit a community, to have a think about this, or how would you say that they would dabble their toes into the whole idea of co-housing?
I'll post a few books into the chat box, and there's a co-housing 101 video I did a few years ago that is a great way to sort of get an overview, find out the whole sort of idea and process and everything else. The Canadian Co-housing Network and Sage Seniors Co-housing Advocates are both really great organizations that do a lot of great work, and the CCN, especially from a Canadian context, has been championing this since Windsong was created, and they, including Mary and I and others, are happy to help and move things forward. That's, I think, really the great thing about co-housing and this larger not-for-profit development framework, is that all of us are really trying to magnify and make more stuff happen. We're not in a competition. We're actually trying to figure out how can we make it easier for this to happen so that more people can live a better quality of life, own their own home, and create a better sustainable world.
Yeah, that's what we're all about here at SmartNet Alliance, too. Collaboration over competition, right? So really appreciate it, Chris. Excellent presentation. Great to hear about all the work you're up to. Really appreciate all the resources. Go ahead and share anything into chat there, and we'll maybe keep you around. I know Larissa's going to come back and talk about Roots to Roofs and talk a little bit more about that project. So really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, well, let's move on to some Ottawa co-housing projects now, and we've got Rosalind J. Hill and Linda Kraus here. So Rosalind is an award-winning residential architect who has designed stunning homes and multi-unit developments in Ottawa area for over 2 decades. In addition to providing development advice and approval expertise, she has stimulated cutting-edge research into neighborhood infill. And we'll have a recording from her. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to join us live. And then after, we'll have Linda, who has deep community roots in the Ottawa area, assisting in an operational context with the growth of several locally based businesses, including Bridgehead and Farm Boy. Her experience in design and management complements her organizational skill set. She'll talk a little bit about what's going on with Ottawa co-housing. So let me go ahead and fire up the video. We'll get that rolling, and then we'll come back with some live Q&A and a bit more detail with Linda. Thanks so much.
Hello. I'm Rosalind Hill, co-founder of Ottawa Co-housing. Linda and I started Ottawa Co-housing because we recognized that together we had the skill set to make co-housing a success story in Ottawa. And these are crazy times. Quite apart from the pandemic, we have a housing crisis, environmental crisis, epidemic of loneliness, and co-housing has an important role to play in all of this. First, what is co-housing? Co-housing is very much like other forms of housing. Co-housing can take the physical form of a row of townhouses or a small apartment building. Significantly, though, co-housing is designed with dedicated dwelling units, complete and private, clustered or organized together with common indoor and outdoor space as a focal point. The common amenities in a co-housing development are similar to what you'd find in a condominium, and there's a bit more space. But importantly, these spaces function as a structured community hub, and they facilitate casual social interaction as much as possible. But that's just the physical side of what a co-housing development is. Most importantly, a co-housing development is a community of friends and neighbors who live in this place together because they value their personal privacy, but they also value community. They want to live in a place where community is front and center, where community can be an important, balanced part of their life. So let's talk now about co-housing and the environment. The majority of co-housing units that have been built in North America have used more green building science than surrounding housing. Projects have had varying degrees of green construction elements, some of them being certified in different ways throughout North America. Now, I'm sure many of you in this group have experienced the challenge of including green features in construction projects, particularly in urban locations, because many clients, when they review their budget, especially these days with material costs fluctuating, clients will strike green features from plans once the full costs are on the table. Even when green upgrades have life cycle cost benefits, there's a sticker shock, when clients face the cost of the initial investments. Co-housing communities are different. They form around shared values, they agree to those values, and they hold each other to account for the agreements that they've made. So unlike other clients who might get to the bottom line and choose between the green upgrade or the hot tub, and kind of lean towards the hot tub, co-housing communities have historically held each other to account and have followed through more effectively than other households. So that's really good news for the green building industry, that this community dynamic brings out the best in us when it comes to investing in green construction. But I'm going to go further and say Ottawa Co-housing is very interested not just in green construction elements, but in foundationally ecologically responsible urban choices. We're not seeking to facilitate rural co-housing developments, and an awful lot of co-housing development historically has been rural. We're working toward urban walkable infill and projects that fall into the definition of gentle density. So in existing built-up areas, older neighborhoods. Neighborhood residents do tend to cringe at the thought of infill, but we aspire to show them the very best of gentle density and create developments that are catalysts for change in neighborhoods, that kickstart a shift to a more dynamic street and really get people out of their cars and walking, biking, taking transit. It is critically important in addressing our housing crisis and our environmental crisis together to transition our urban neighborhoods to neighborhoods that are much more densely populated in order to meet thresholds that can be transit supported and in order to transition from a culture of auto dependence to a culture of active transportation. And if you want to know more about that, please check out Walkable Ottawa's website. Co-housing has an important role to play in changing people's perception about density in urban neighborhoods. Co-housing communities attract people who love their neighborhoods, who bring cool, eco-sensitive, interesting designs. They're the kinds of people who host block parties and advocate for trees. They're the kinds of neighbors people enjoy. And to have these people demonstrating what a multi-unit building could be for a neighborhood could really get us past the stigmatism around this kind of green multi-unit infill. So now let's think a little bit about one of the most significant environmental features of any small multi-unit building. Shared walls, floors, ceilings, shared heat, shared cooling, and shared land. Shared elements are one of the most significant environmental features of any multi-unit building. There is no insulation or R-value that beats a shared wall. There is no foundation wall as environmentally responsible as a foundation wall that supports a multi-unit building. Shared elements. Now, I'm a residential architect with expertise in infill development planning. My architectural practice employs a team of 6 highly skilled and creative staff. We work on residential infra projects from single-family homes to apartment towers, but our passion is missing middle architecture. So buildings that are up to 3 stories that fit well in neighborhoods because they look like towns or large singles, but they actually contain a mix of many different sizes of dwellings. And that's why working with Linda on Ottawa co-housing is such a good fit for me. Co-housing has an awful lot to lend to the conversation about eco-friendly construction. Groups of people who are committed to green building upgrades, but also people who are committed to those really fundamental choices of sharing walls, floors, and ceilings, living in multi-unit buildings that fit in and add density and social dynamic to communities, that make communities better, that bring increased density and people who love to walk. We are very close to a tipping point when it comes to shifting from car-centric neighborhoods to walkable neighborhoods. But we need some of these inspiring projects to tip the balance and to show us how neighborhoods can do better and be better. Thank you so much for listening, for allowing me to present today and for involving us in your group. Please visit our website, ottawacohousing.ca. Learn more about co-housing and the role it has to play in green building. Please help us spread the word about Ottawa co-housing. Send people to our website. Get the word out. Include us in your newsletters. Please go to our website and sign up for our emails. And help us make Ottawa co-housing a household name. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks so much to Rosalind for that video. I really appreciate her and her passionate words. Now let's bring in Linda. Linda, I know you're going to talk a little bit about what you're up to with Ottawa Co-housing and maybe share some slides.
Yes, hi. Thank you. Thank you, Nick, for hosting this event and for all the other guest speakers for attending. It makes it really rich. And thank you, everyone, all the participants for coming out to show your interest in sustainable housing. So Rosalind and I took it as sustainable as in environmental sustainability, but as you can see how Chris and Mike both presented, sustainability counts on a lot more than just environmental factors for sure. I'm going to share a few slides with you, not too much, and then I'll open it up to questions as that might be more interesting. So I'll just go over the process that Ottawa Co-housing does specifically. We are essentially a matchmaking service and a shepherding service. Excuse me. We collect households, whether they're singles, couples, families, or also preformed groups, and we match them together based on some key factors that are important to know whether they'll work well together in community. Some of those factors would be their budgets, their desired location, the character of the community that they would like to form, and what their core values might be. And then we're also looking for people who are looking for a similar size of community. Some people would like to have very small communities, and others are looking for a much larger village type of community. So we basically do a fairly involved intake process where we're assessing with each individual or household what they're looking for and what their timelines are. And then once we have enough people who fit the same sort of genre, I would say, we can group them together in an affinity group. And then we would suggest this group to them, and they, after doing some meetings and some group work together, they can decide whether this feels right for them or not. This is a different approach from what a lot of other co-housing consultants and services do, because we're starting with the individual household. We're looking for people who are interested in co-housing, who want to move forward, but have not formed a group yet, or who are struggling to know what to do next. We want to help them find their people, find their group, and then help that group develop. So once a suggested group forms and commits to each other, we shepherd them through a series of group modules. These modules are specific to healthy formation of their community and their group. And we prepare them for all the group decisions that they will need to make together, and how to make them, and how to hit the road bumps that are anticipated ahead for them. At the same time that they are learning how they will become a community, we are also helping them find a site. We're also helping them find a development team, financing structure, and team of professionals that they'll need for the development process and the construction process of their community. We lead them through both this group formation process and the development process from start to finish. We act as a liaison with the development team. So we understand how developers work, and we understand how the groups work and what their goals are, and we can aid sort of the communications between the two sides to make the project move forward smoothly and in a time-effective manner. And we'll also always be there to help our group find the resources that they need. We're not experts in everything, but we're reaching out to co-housing affiliates and professionals across the board to be able to provide resources to our group. So I'll tell you a little bit about, we started in January 2022, so very new for us. We're hosting monthly events. We've held 8 events so far. Some of them include architecture. Some of them are revolve around personal financing. They're all of our group, all of these events are either online or in person, and open to the public. Anyone who's interested can come, and it's just to learn more about co-housing and to find out whether it's the right fit for you. We did a great session on group dynamics with these 2 women here, Suzanne Gagnon and Kathy McRanera. Both live in co-housing communities, and they're both facilitation and conflict manager experts. So that was a really exciting meeting and discussion. We learned a lot there. We actually did a meetup.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in. Are you sharing slides, or do you want to do that after?
My apologies, everyone.
All good, no worries. Sorry.
I just forgot that one button, Nick.
There we go. Yeah.
There we go.
If you go to slideshow, you can do full screen there.
Can you see that now?
Yeah.
Everyone can see this now. Sorry, this was the process I was going through.
Sure. So we'll kind of go through for that. No problems.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is a matching together, then our potential group. This is what we do once our group has committed to each other. They become a community. We help them form all those necessary skills for that. We also help them find a site and an appropriate development team to support the development of their community, and a construction team as well. And then we work with them. We basically guide them through the whole process, and we're there with them as they move through the project and look for their financing and their legal structure and so forth. And during design, city approvals, construction, we act as their liaison. After construction as well, we do intend to support our residents and our finished communities to help them in any way that they need to continue learning and to support them. Okay, sorry, I didn't get to share that before. So this slide is just about a sampling of our architecture community event that we held. We were able to connect with Stephen Hill in a guest interview. He's in the UK. He's done a lot of co-housing work in the UK. And this was Suzanne Gagnon and Kathy McRanera who did the Making It Work project or meeting about group dynamics. And then I wanted to share this. We brought in 3 local sustainable builders to meet with some of our clients and our interested participants in a casual sort of barbecue. And we were able to have discussions about what some of the what's going on with sustainable building in the Ottawa area, and also what are some of the constraints that they're under, and how the whole industry works for them. And then we just hosted an event in July. The Soul Sisters are a group of 4 women who have formed a co-housing community of 4. They've been at this for 5 years. They are under construction right now. They're due to be finished by December, I believe, is the current mark. So they invited us to allow our attendees to tour their site, which was a really wonderful opportunity. It got people to understand how a personal unit fits within, you know, the shared space that they also share, and sort of how much like a 900-foot square a unit looks like what does it feel like. So this is a great event that got a lot of people excited. There's been actually an article in the last Saturday's Citizen newspaper in the home section. They featured this, and Rosin was the architect for this building, and she really helped these women get their project moving forward because of her knowledge within the development industry in Ottawa and how to work through the city processes. So that was a really fun event we just had in July. Sorry, and now I will stop sharing. And I'll just show you my face. I'd just like to tell you a little bit where we're at right now. We have a first group forming here in Ottawa. We're calling them Group A until they choose a name for themselves. This group is very environmentally conscious. They have a strong commitment to trying to include as much environmental initiatives within their building as they will be able to and can afford. They are looking for an urban walkable neighborhood. So that's the sites we will be seeking for them. We'll need to match that criteria. They will be forming a multi-generational community. And they're looking to be about 15 to 24 households in total. That's their goal. They will be recruiting for more households. We're starting with a core group, and through Ottawa Co-Housing, we will be finding folks for them that might suit this group. So if anyone's interested, this group is raring to go, and they want to develop pretty much as quickly as possible. So we are looking for recruits for this group. We are welcoming new intakes all the time. However, whether you're looking to form co-housing right away or in 5 years time, or you're just interested, you want to learn more about it before you make any kind of long-term decision, when you intake into Ottawa Co-Housing's roster, we start to look for other people and other households that are similar to you, and introduce you to each other when the time is right. But at the same time, you can also attend all our events and be on our email list, and just continue to learn about co-housing. It's sort of new to this area, and we just want to spread the word about co-housing communities and all the benefits that Chris shared specifically in his slides to co-housing, and why it's such a great model moving forward in this day and age, especially. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Great. I didn't see anything come through on chat yet there, Linda, so maybe we'll let people sort of absorb, and if we'll stick around and answer some into chat there if there's any that come up. But no, great work that you're doing. Nice to see it coming along, and great to hear that there's a group kind of ready to roll. And yeah, we'll watch your progress, and we'll keep our fingers crossed that we start getting all these co-housing communities popping up.
Yes, let's hope so.
Thanks so much, Linda, and thanks again to Rosalind as well for recording that message for us. Really appreciate the hard work you're doing.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
No problems. So we've got one last presentation tonight, and we've got Larissa Spendi. And I've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years. This is probably one of the most impressive bios that I've ever read. Really, I even took this and compressed it as much as I could, but there was so much good stuff that I couldn't leave out. So let's get rolling. Larissa has 15 years of experience bringing a grounded political ecology approach to sustainability research, community engagement, project management, and local economic development. Since 2018, she has been a co-director of Roots to Roofs, leading engagement communications and programming coordination, developing high-performance, affordable homes in partnership with BC First Nations. Larissa holds an interdisciplinary Master's in Culture, Environment, and Sustainability from the University of Oslo, a BA in Political Science from the University of Alberta, and International Association of Public Participation certification. Other experience includes direct engagement and communications with Renew Well Project, an analyst at Pembina Institute's Renewables in Remote Communities. She served on the board of board of Iron and Earth, working for a just transition to clean energy. Along this diverse path, she has also had formative adventures as an administrator of an Arctic diamond exploration camp, an oil patch EMR with helicopter ambulance, and designing Goldsmith for 6 years, ran a CETA-funded diamond mine in Sierra Leone, worked on a documentary project in Palestine, advised a rural community in Gambia, and raced a sailboat across the Atlantic. I mean, I'm hoping some of this is made up, Larissa, because I don't feel like I've done enough with my life here. So let's welcome her in, Larissa. What an amazing resume. I think we can all give it.
It's
Wow.
always so funny when you hear it back, but
Wow, I don't think I do enough. So
well,
excited to have you on here.
Thanks for that. That's really kind, Nick. Yeah, I guess it's part of how my ADD is manifested. So, but I'm lucky that actually all those kind of skills sort of come to bear in the work that I've been doing for the last 5 years or so with Roots to Roofs. And I do have a presentation I can share with you here. So just bear with me for a second. You gonna let me? Okay. Has that popped up for everybody? Okay.
Yeah, that's looking great. You're all good to go.
Okay, great. Can you see the little head in the top corner too, or is it just the screen?
I can see your toolbar there, but no problems. It's still pretty clean.
Okay, yeah. So thanks again. And first off, I just want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from the traditional and unceded territories of the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich people. This is like Lekwungen speaking territories and Vancouver Island and Victoria in so-called BC. So just as a way of introduction, it's really important to us to make sure that we are always bearing that in mind as we move forward in this in a good way in these partnerships. So I'm just going to pop forward here, and it's really nice to be in such a nice group talking about these things. And we've been primarily, I think, today talking about sort of the co-housing opportunities and the various ideas around how this might function for communities. To think about housing and to think about affordable housing in particular, but really the elephant in the room in the work that we're doing is the fact that here's some just pretty serious statistics when we're looking at what that means on reserve. And Roots to Roofs does work in partnership with Chris and Mike and a number of others that work off reserve, but primarily what we have, and I'll get into this a little bit later, we really came together to try to look at where the challenges on reserve really are in terms of housing and examine that from a research perspective with a team of partners and experts in partnership with different communities. Because when you're facing statistics like this, and I don't need to read them out loud, and you're facing like these structural issues that have been so problematic and that are just ongoing and really insurmountable when we look at both those stats that we were talking about general housing, and then we look at what it is on reserve. And it's really hard to conceptualize the really gross neglect that has actually, and the complexity and the lack of infrastructure and just the arduous process of bureaucracy that First Nations are really forced to kind of try to navigate to get basic levels of housing built on reserve. And this is a problem that's ubiquitous across the country. We are mostly working in BC, but we do have partnerships with people all across the country and are in conversations about it. But it does beg the question sometimes when you're even dealing with current grants and current programs about why haven't they figured out a better way to do this? Why is it still on these overtaxed folks in community to try to navigate this? Being a housing manager is one of the most difficult jobs because they're dealing with the day-to-day triage of rent collection and arrears, and is there a drip that's been going on the toilet in a house that has 12 people in it, and the toilet's now about to fall through the floor because nobody was able to fix that super minor thing because you can't get a plumber into a remote community. Like, that's one part of their day. The other part of their day is they're expected to write these 200-page proposals, and it's just the levels of complexity that they face are so daunting that it's no wonder that this is a capacity-based piece that we've been looking at. And so we really are a partnership-oriented organization. And we really do approach this from a relational perspective, recognizing that as external people, we do not know the current context in any of these communities. We spend a lot of time. We really do try to do a longer term relationship with the communities where we work, but the community members are the experts. And so we really have internalized this idea of two-eyed seeing around traditional knowledge is so important, and we are learning more and more about how the gaps in our knowledge really are actually things like localized knowledge, things like how do we actually function as a community that cares for each other. And we're talking about revillaging when we talk about co-housing. Well, these are still on a lot of levels far more functional communities, even if the infrastructure sucks. So we have a lot to learn. And so bringing in the knowledge of traditional Indigenous values along with some of these more modern technologies and whatnot, that's where we bring that two-eyed seeing into this piece. And Roots to Roofs isn't interested in being owners of projects. We are interested in being supporters. We want to see communities do this for themselves and create that capacity. And ultimately, we are driven by the urgent need for grounded climate and justice solutions. So a little bit different parameters than a lot of organizations working out there. As I said, this is a partnership-based relationship. We started off, Clean Tech Community Gateway was a kind of a nonprofit think tank looking at creating energy autonomy for communities. And then Sauk First Nation is like a leader in the space, and Chief Planis has for decades talked about kind of creating energy autonomy and community resiliency. And so it was a really nice partnership that we came together to explore some of these ideas around solutions-oriented, community-based ideas. And ultimately we became a resources group last year, which is like a not-for-profit consultancy, and incorporated as Roots to Roofs. And that was with our partners at CUSW and ASWA as well. So we're really grateful for that. And we realized that it's not just about that hardware of developing the high performance affordable housing on reserve, but really the important pieces of software. So how do we embed the community capacity and support that, and including training members, not only just to be like the managers or the builders, but also the people on the ground that are actually, involved in the maintenance, involved in the building. So I'm just going to skip ahead here too. So when we look at the focus areas that particularly to our sort of Indigenous sphere of work, elders aging in place is a big space where we could learn a lot in, and that was accentuated during COVID, when we saw senior citizens languishing in care homes or, really isolated at home. And in Indigenous communities, elders fared much better because they're integrated into their community and they're involved and respected in their community. So, coming back to that, co-housing is a great model for this, and it kind of, Indigenous folks tend to understand why this is indeed a natural way of living. It is sort of a revillaging. And so many years, the housing that's been developed on reserve was sort of this templated Calgary design, split level house. You walk in the door and it's stairs up, stairs down. How does that function for young people and elders and big multi-generational communities? These were not designed with their purposes in mind. I'll come to one of our example projects at the end, but when you start to think about how to incorporate elders to age in place, the other thing that's important in communities is that often care homes are way out of their community. They're sometimes hours of drive away, maybe a boat ride. So when elders have to leave community for that upgraded care, it's really a loss of knowledge, of support, of it's a huge loss to the whole community when they have to leave. And it's also, they tend to not do very well because they're away from the community that maybe they've lived all their life. So trying to prevent that and build that into our structural building integrity is really like a important foundational piece for our design. Also, again, the collaboration and deep engagement and spending a lot of time. That's you don't learn this stuff without doing that. You really do need to take the time and invest in that relationship. Everything we do has a climate lens or to it as well, as much as possible, in that we see that as an urgent issue that can't be ignored anymore, and that the building sciences really do have at least a small solution and a part to play. So that is really important. And often when we look at how TIK, like traditional Indigenous knowledge, can be integrated, it's things like, you know, building down maybe in a hot climate and into, you know, making sure there's space. And we've done some interesting things with combining, like, you know, for wood stoves are sort of a non-starter in a lot of remote communities, but you don't really put a wood stove typically in a passive house. So we actually done research with a couple of other engineering firms to sort of look at how that could be accommodated and still be really high performance. And then finally, with the trades training, we are partners in with a number of different trades organizations and training bodies that are interested in indigenizing the Red Seal trades programming. And so that's part of what we're interested in doing as well. So this is just also to give a quick shout out to all our great funders that have gotten us through to this point and continue to support us. Real Estate Foundation of BC, Vancouver Foundation, CMHC, and ISK's Indigenous Homes Innovation Initiative were our foundational funders for our work. And as I said, at the bottom, there's University of Victoria, Industrial Training Authority, Camosun College, and BCIT on some of our education and training modules. Co-housing options, BC Housing, RDH Building Sciences, and Catalyst Housing have been foundational in helping deal with different policy pieces and in funding different projects. And then of course our Indigenous partners are, it's a fluctuating list, but we have formal agreements with Sauk First Nation, Akam First Nation, which is part of Ktunaxa territory, Sayout, which is also part of the Greater Wasanich groups. So within that outreach and engagement, you know, we really do develop from an asset-based community development approach, which is really about, again, surfacing the knowledge that's in the community and acknowledging that they really are the experts. And then also comprehensive community planning, which is, and again, a program with ISK that does broad-based planning over a period of years, usually led by internal staff and community members. And me and one of the other partners have been a mentor in that programming. It really helps take the community planning out of any kind of political realm and really creates a solid shared foundation and vision for how they want to approach different aspects of governance. So it's quite a beautiful process to be a part of. And so within that sort of sphere of things and the other work that we do, we've had lots of meetings with other partnership organizations, Indigenous communities, a lot of opportunities to speak to groups like this and discuss our approach, and then some guest spots in different seminars and different educational programs, as well as employing some co-op students and interns. So I just want to go back for 1 second actually and show you, this is one of the best engagements I felt like we did for a while. It was really fun. We managed to catch in between COVID, and I'll show some other pictures later, a chance to do some sort of design charrette work, and it was lots of kids that showed up. So having them come out with their felt markers in Akam was really fun activity on a hot summer day in between COVID. But so to talk about our sort of most successful example to date, we've developed a 20-unit resilient community and co-housing project in Akam. And it's gotten BC Housing funding and some other funding as well. And we've been working with them for a number of years. This is again a net zero elder aging in community project. So on one side is 10 elders aging in place. On the other side is families units. And in between is like a corridor, garden sort of space. And then at either end, there's the elders wanted a medicinal garden, and the kids get a playground at the opposite end. And in the middle, we have, I'll just skip ahead and I'll come back to that. We have a really beautiful common house design. We're still figuring out exactly how to fund that, because BC Housing has very restrictive issues around how much amenity space they're willing to provide. And the community has said that they are willing to self-fund some of this, but we are looking at other options. And there were a few different funding pots that we didn't get that we were hoping for, but we haven't given up on the vision of this, because this is actually intending to serve the whole community where this is going to be based. At this area where the housing is, there is nothing for about 15 minutes drive. And so this can serve as a transit hub for all the remote people living on these further out compounds, as well as there's the Elders in Place hub, but there's also visiting spaces for healthcare professionals, childcare, elders lounge, community kitchen, and this sort of spare bedroom or caregiver space. So we're really quite excited about figuring out exactly how we're going to do that. But these are just some pictures from some of the engagements we've done over the last few years, and you know, you can see all the kids' drawings all over. Some of them get really involved and pretty funny, but it's been a real joy to work with ACCM, and we could just continue to be patient about figuring out how this process is going to go. Another project we've been working on that's sort of fun and worth sharing is pictured as Elder Marty from ACCM, and he had a vision of using stack wood, also called cordwood building. And so we went out to pursue funding to look at that as a low carbon, locally resourced, highly resilient, really interesting building technique that's not traditional to the territory, but is a traditional building technique that's used all over the world. And so we've been exploring that with ACCM and with SAUC, and because you can use low diameter wood, so it actually alleviates pressure on old growth logging or other high logging. It's younger wood. You can also use wood that's fire damage. So in BC, we've got a lot of forest fires that happen. And so you can even use some fire damage wood, which is sort of interesting. So there's been a lot of anecdotal work on this, but we've also been working with a few different scientific organizations and building science folks to actually do some testing on this because of the interesting components and qualities that this has for like insulation and value and whatnot. So just something else that's sort of fun in the sphere of the work we do, but I'll maybe leave it at that. There's lots more we could always talk about there, but there's my email, and our website is just www.roots2roofs.org. And I'll stop it there so we can address some of the questions, because I can see the chat box was blown up, but I didn't open it.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a little bit off topic chat. Some net zero. Some people just loving your pictures and saying it looks like a beautiful development. If anybody does have any particular questions for Larissa, please add them into chat now. Wondering if you have what's sort of upcoming for Roots to Roofs. Anything that you're sort of looking at, any developments or projects that you're excited about down the pipe?
Well, we're always doing a few different things. Like this one, we're just sort of waiting on some processes. But you know, the process of getting to the point, like our team is a bunch of different experts in different spheres of this world, and I'm lucky because the community engagement always comes first, and so I get to do a lot of the early work, working with community. And so with the communities where we have been for a while, there is still process there to figure out what's going to work and figure out where the funding is going to come from. And so what other projects are we working on? Oh, well, with SAIA, we're actually doing some policy support and updating. And one of the things that they've been doing is looking at creative ways to address arrears with a cultural lens. And so that's kind of interesting. So thinking about fish for arrears, for example. So community members often will do a lot of fishing, and then it's brought back to the community to be redistributed. And instead of just donating that fish, that can be partially go to some different housing arrears or costs. And so some very creative and interesting opportunities to think about how we can actually decolonize some of these structures that are so punitive and complex. And so really thinking it through these various options and working with our partners who are coming up with some really fun ideas and like really meaningful change in how we approach some of this work.
Awesome. Yeah, great projects. Nice to hear about all the great work going on. Hope to make it out to BC to see some of that stuff. Didn't see too many questions come, so we'll sort of let things roll. Didn't know if Mike or Chris wanted to pop in for any final comments. This would be a great time. Want to thank everybody so much. It was a great addition. I think we got people sort of thinking about, hey, maybe I want to live in a co-housing community. Maybe I want to support something different. Great session. I know we do need different models out there as far as, how we're buying and selling our houses. Chris, I saw you come off mute there. Did you have a couple of final comments?
Yeah, I was just going to add, so out in BC right now, we're also in the process of setting up the community wealth framework and looking for sites. So there's hopefully a few projects going to be happening out there. I just wanted to acknowledge Mike again. He's done a lot of great work over the last 40 years, and we're building on his expertise, his experience, and trying to harness it to do some other really great stuff. So thanks, Mike, for mentoring us and spending the time to make stuff go. I know you want to build 10,000 units before you pass on to the next life, but it's also great working with you.
Yeah, Mike, we did have somebody ask, why is homeownership preferred versus renting? So maybe you want to jump in, answer that, and share some final comments.
Sure. And how much time do you have? In our society, in our culture, in our economics, everything has been structured to the advantage of homeowners. And so the unfortunate thing is that for the very same reason, there's significant disadvantages economically, culturally, and in terms of pride related to rental. So as much as possible, you want to allow everybody to participate in the area that the economics has said you're going to get a big advantage. And so that's where the advantages come from homeownership. And you can do endless reading about the advantages of homeownership simply because of the cultural situation that people are facing. So that's where the difference is. Also, the interesting thing is that homeownership is the one area where people are willing to put their resources on the table to make it less expensive. Whereas in rental, there's no advantage to putting your resources on the table to make it less expensive, or more expensive is what happens, because you don't get any benefit from that. So the nice thing about homeownership is there's many secondary advantages that come with it, not to belabor the fact, but it can be done without grants and subsidies from government. So you can do large scale. And what we've done with the large scale that mentioned poverty hubs is when you get up to 1,000 units, you can put 20 or 40,000 square feet of support into the development that allows for programming to allow people to continue their path out of poverty, so that they get not only the housing, but they get job training and jobs. So there's just more flexibility to it. That's the key answer to that question.
Great. Well, thanks so much to everybody.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, no, thanks to you, Mike. Thanks, Chris. I want to thank Linda and Rosalind as well for their time. It's been a great addition. I know we had a lot of different inspiration kind of go around, and thanks to Sandra and Chris Weisblog and everybody in chat there. Really appreciate everybody's comments. Make sure those in the Ottawa area do join us on September 24th. We'll have presentations on passive homes. We'll have home builders, solar, renewable technologies. It's all happening at Ottawa's Lansdowne Park. So make sure you get registered on that. I did share it into chat. And just stay tuned to us. Stay tuned to SmartNet Alliance for more of these virtual events. And want to thank everybody so much for another great virtual green drinks. And we'll keep you posted on what we're up to in the fall. So once again, I'm Nick at SmartNet Alliance. Thanks to everybody for a fabulous night. And hopefully we're trucking on to create a more sustainable world. So thanks again, everybody.